Bring the light in, and the darkness has no argument left. The illusion of secrecy collapses when you understand that everything is already known. God doesn't discover your sin. He invites you to acknowledge it so that you can rediscover yourself. The purpose of revelation is not to destroy, but to rebuild. When you admit your secret struggle, you are not informing God of anything new. You are simply aligning your will with reality, and that alignment, that humility, is where freedom begins. The most profound realization I had in that encounter was this: nothing you hide is ever truly hidden, but everything you reveal can be redeemed. That's the divine exchange. Exposure for healing, confession for cleansing, surrender for strength. It's terrifying to confront what you've buried, but it's the only way to live authentically, because as long as you hide, you'll always live in fear of being found out, and fear, not sin, becomes your master. You conquer it by yielding to grace, by allowing God's light to touch the places you've kept hidden. Grace does not simply erase sin, it transforms the sinner. It replaces shame with identity, guilt with gratitude, bondage with purpose. And that transformation doesn't happen once. It's a continual process. Every day you must choose to live in the light, to keep no corner of your soul in shadow, because the moment you return to secrecy, you invite the weight back in. Grace is not a one-time rescue. It's a lifelong renewal. The beauty of it all is that what once enslaved you can become the very thing that empowers you to help others. The grace that lifted you will flow through you. And the same Jesus who revealed your sin will reveal through you the power of redemption to those still trapped in darkness. It's not shame that keeps you humble, it's gratitude. Gratitude that the God who saw everything still chose to call you his own. Not because you were flawless, but because his grace was sufficient to make you whole. When I asked Jesus how one truly overcomes secret sin, not just in a moment of confession, but for the rest of their life, he showed me something that changed the way I understood transformation. He didn't speak of perfection, nor did he demand a flawless moral record. What he revealed was a path, a process of daily renewal, built upon a kind of spiritual discipline that binds heaven's truth to the human soul. Because victory over sin isn't achieved through emotion or guilt. It's maintained through structure, through commitment, through walking a narrow path one step at a time. The first thing he showed me was that confession alone is not enough. Confession is a doorway, but you must walk through it. You can admit your sin 1,000 times, but if your heart doesn't move toward discipline, your life will remain unchanged. The path to renewal begins when honesty meets responsibility. You see, we often wait for divine power to remove what we refuse to resist. But freedom is not a passive miracle. It's an active partnership. You cooperate with grace by doing what only you can do, and God does what only he can do. It's a partnership between divine strength and human choice. I began to see that spiritual discipline is not punishment, it's alignment. Every act of obedience realigns you with the structure of truth. When you pray, even when you don't feel like it, when you say no to temptation that once controlled you, when you confess your weakness before it becomes your downfall, you are training your soul to live in light again. Renewal is built on rhythm. Sin thrives in chaos, but holiness grows through consistency. The battle for your purity is not won in grand moments of passion. It's won in the quiet moments of discipline, when no one is watching, when your flesh demands compromise, but your spirit chooses conviction. And that is the essence of spiritual growth. It's not emotional, it's intentional. Jesus showed me that transformation begins not when you feel inspired, but when you act on truth regardless of your emotions. The heart follows the discipline of the will. Every small act of obedience strengthens your character, and character is what sustains freedom. You can't maintain victory on enthusiasm alone. You need structure, boundaries, and habits that reinforce your spiritual identity. Think of it like this. Every sin once lived in your life as a pattern. It wasn't random, it was repeated behavior. So if you want to replace sin, you need new patterns, habits that rewire your desires, that retrain your mind. You must create a rhythm of righteousness that becomes stronger than the rhythm of rebellion. That's why the path to renewal is slow. It's not a single breakthrough, it's a daily rebuilding. Every choice you make is either reinforcing the old self or shaping the new one. Jesus made it clear to me that renewal is not about perfection, it's about progression. You are not defined by how many times you fall, but by how many times you rise and walk forward again. Every stumble can become a lesson if you refuse to stay down. Repentance is not about shame. When I stood at the threshold between life and eternity, I expected darkness, silence, perhaps even peace. But instead, I was met with a clarity that shattered every illusion I had ever built about myself. The moment I opened my eyes beyond death, I knew I was standing before the source of all truth, and truth, when revealed in its rawest form, does not ask for your permission. It simply exposes every hidden motive, every buried secret, every justification you had carefully layered over your conscience stands naked before divine light. It is terrifying and liberating at the same time, because in that moment, you realize that all the masks you wore were never for God. They were for yourself. When Jesus appeared before me, He didn't speak immediately. He didn't have to. His presence alone communicated more than words ever could. There was no anger, no accusation, only an overwhelming sense of awareness. In His light, I saw my life not as a sequence of years or events, but as a landscape of choices, each one either moving me closer to or further from that divine truth. Every hidden thought, every moment I had convinced myself that no one will know, was suddenly visible in perfect clarity. I understood that there is no such thing as a secret in the kingdom of truth. You see, the illusion of secrecy is one of the greatest traps of the human mind. It's how we rationalize compromise. We tell ourselves that what no one sees doesn't matter, that private sins don't have public consequences. But in the spiritual dimension, nothing is hidden. Every thought carries weight. Every act echoes through the corridors of eternity. The false comfort of secrecy is the breeding ground of corruption. It starts small, a thought you never confess, a desire you entertain for a moment too long, a lie you justify because it seems harmless. Yet each of these seeds begins to grow in the soil of your soul. And before you know it, you've constructed an internal world that no longer matches the external image you project. This dissonance between who we appear to be and who we truly are is what tears us apart from the inside. It's what leads to anxiety, shame, and spiritual exhaustion. You can't live divided forever. The human soul wasn't designed to sustain two opposing realities. Sooner or later, one will consume the other. When Jesus revealed my hidden self, I saw how secrecy had subtly become my own form of bondage. It wasn't the act itself that held the most power. It was the lie that it could remain unseen. People often misunderstand sin as a list of forbidden actions. But that's not quite accurate. Sin is a distortion of truth. It's when something within you begins to operate independently of your divine design. It's not simply doing something wrong, it's hiding from the light that could set you right. And once you start living in that shadow, you begin to shrink from your true potential. You lose your moral authority, your sense of direction, your connection to purpose, because purpose requires alignment, the unity between your outer life and your inner convictions. When I was shown the full picture of my own life, it wasn't the grand failures that hurt the most. It was the small, quiet moments where I chose deception over authenticity. The casual justifications, the promises I made to myself but didn't keep, those were the fragments that weakened the foundation of my soul. And Jesus, in His infinite wisdom, showed me that overcoming secret sin isn't just about moral behavior. It's about reclaiming integrity. It's about becoming whole again. When you believe that no one sees, you begin to live without accountability. And when accountability disappears, so does growth. Every human being needs the tension of truth, pressing against their self-deception. That's what keeps you alive spiritually. The absence of that pressure leads to decay. You begin to rot from the inside while maintaining a smile on the outside. That's what secret sin does. It creates a dual existence, and the longer you sustain it, the harder it becomes to tell which version of you is real. But here's the paradox. Even though you think you're hiding your flaws, you're actually imprisoning yourself with them. Every secret becomes a guard at the door of your own freedom. You can't truly love because love demands transparency. You can't truly worship because worship requires surrender. And you can't truly grow because growth needs light. The more you conceal, the less of you there is to be healed. Jesus didn't expose my hidden failures to humiliate me. He did it so I could finally see how much energy I had wasted maintaining an illusion. He made me understand that truth isn't your enemy, it's your liberation. The pain of being exposed is nothing compared to the suffering of living in self-deception. The divine revelation of my own condition was not condemnation, it was an invitation to awaken. The human mind is capable of astonishing denial. We can look directly at our flaws and still convince ourselves that they're manageable, that we're in control. But sin, especially secret sin, feeds on denial. It grows in the shadows of justification. You can't fight what you refuse to name. And yet, Jesus showed me that the moment you name it, the moment you drag that hidden darkness into the light, its power dissolves. Darkness only exists where light is absent. So when Jesus showed me the truth of who I had become beneath the surface, I understood that He wasn't merely showing me my sins. He was showing me my potential, the version of myself that still existed beneath the layers of shame and secrecy. The purpose of exposure was transformation. He wasn't pointing to the dirt to condemn me. He was uncovering the gold hidden underneath. We live in a culture that celebrates image over authenticity, performance over purity. But image is fragile. It shatters under pressure. The strength of your life must come from integrity, from the consistency between your private world and your public one. That's where peace lives. That's where authority flows from. When you walk in truth, you stop fearing discovery. You stop pretending, you stop wasting your energy maintaining illusions, and that energy becomes fuel for growth, creativity, and purpose. That's what Jesus wanted me to see. That the only way to truly live is to stop hiding from the light that gives life, because the moment you stand in that light, even your brokenness begins to shine with meaning. And so, when the revelation of truth overwhelmed me, I didn't feel destroyed. I felt reborn. Because for the first time, there was no gap between who I was and what I appeared to be. That's the beginning of victory. Not perfection, but honesty. The kind of honesty that doesn't flinch under the gaze of eternity. That's the moment where transformation truly begins. And that's where the journey to overcoming secret sin takes its first step. A step that leads deeper into the mystery of grace, where everything once hidden begins to heal under the eternal light of truth. When Jesus showed me the true weight of sin, I finally understood that what we call minor or private sin is anything but small in the eyes of eternity. There is no such thing as a harmless compromise. Every secret, every indulgence of the flesh, every act of dishonesty carries a consequence far beyond the moment it occurs. It's like a ripple in water, invisible at first, but expanding outward until it touches everything around it. That's the weight of sin. It's not just about moral failure, it's about distortion. The slow bending of your soul away from what is good, what is whole, what is holy. When you sin, you don't merely break a rule, you break alignment with the very structure of reality. And in doing so, you fracture something sacred within yourself. We often deceive ourselves by saying, it's only affecting me. But that's the greatest delusion of all. Nothing you do in secret stays contained. The spiritual law of cause and effect operates whether you believe it or not. Hidden sin corrodes your inner foundation, and sooner or later, the cracks appear. in your relationships, your peace, your purpose, your confidence. Sin has a gravitational pull. It drags everything toward decay. The more you feed it, the heavier your soul becomes, until even your prayers feel burdened by invisible chains. Jesus showed me that sin is not merely an act. It's an energy that reshapes the soul. Every time you lie, you make it easier to lie again. Every time you indulge in something you know is wrong, you desensitize yourself a little more. The moral fabric that once held you together begins to stretch and tear. You lose sensitivity to the voice of conscience. You stop feeling conviction. That's when sin becomes most dangerous. Not when it tempts you, but when it stops bothering you. The true tragedy is not in the fall itself, but in the numbness that follows. That numbness is the death of sensitivity, and sensitivity is the foundation of spiritual growth. The weight of sin is cumulative. You don't feel it all at once. It builds quietly, layer upon layer, like dust settling over a mirror. At first, the reflection is still visible, but over time, the image blurs. You forget what clarity looks like. You convince yourself that the dullness is normal. And yet, deep down, your soul remembers the brightness it once knew, the ache you feel when you're alone. That's your spirit longing for light again. That's the echo of your divine design calling you home. When Jesus revealed this to me, it wasn't through condemnation, it was through clarity. He let me feel for a moment the weight of everything I had ignored, not to destroy me, but to awaken me. Because the only way to overcome sin is to see it for what it truly is. As long as you minimize it, rationalize it, or hide it, it will continue to grow. Sin is like mold. It thrives in darkness and dies in the light. The moment you expose it, it begins to lose its power. But to expose it, you must have courage. The courage to confront what you become, the honesty to admit what you've avoided. Jesus said to me in that light, "Son, I do not reveal to shame, I reveal to redeem." And those words became a key that unlocked everything. Because for so long, I had associated exposure with humiliation. I thought God reveals sin to punish, but He reveals to heal. He doesn't pull back the curtain to destroy you. He does it so you can see the infection that's been killing you from within. It's an act of mercy disguised as discomfort. You see, grace is not sentimental forgiveness, it's transformative power. Grace doesn't say, "Stay as you are and I'll love you anyway." Grace says, "I love you too much to let you remain enslaved." When Jesus confronted the woman caught in adultery, He didn't just say, "Neither do I condemn you." He added, "Go and sin no more." The absence of condemnation was the beginning, not the end. Freedom requires change, and change requires courage. Grace provides both. There's something profoundly human about the instinct to hide. Since Eden, we've been covering ourselves, thinking that fig leaves of justification can hide what the soul knows is wrong. But you can't deceive the light that created you. And yet Jesus doesn't come searching for you with a whip. He comes with open arms. The grace that transforms is not the grace that ignores sin. It's the grace that stares it in the face and says, "This ends today." To experience that kind of grace, you have to first accept the weight of truth. That's why revelation feels painful at first. When you see the full extent of your sin, it breaks you. But that breaking is not destruction. It's preparation. Because only what is broken can be remolded. Jesus showed me that the path to freedom begins with acknowledgement. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. You cannot rise until you face what pulled you down. And yet there's a paradox. When you finally face the full reality of your sin, you discover that grace was already waiting there. The moment you bring darkness into the light, grace rushes in like oxygen into a suffocating room. It doesn't erase the past, but it rewrites its meaning. Every failure becomes a testimony. Every scar becomes a story of redemption. That's the miracle of grace. It transforms guilt into growth, pain into purpose. I remember feeling the intensity of that divine love. Not a love that overlooked my faults, but one that burned through them. It was fierce, not fragile. It demanded change, yet it empowered me to pursue it. That's what true grace does. It confronts, it convicts, it cleanses. The reason so many never experience transformation is because they only accept half of grace, the forgiveness, not the transformation. But forgiveness without change is sentimentality, not salvation. When Jesus showed me the weight of sin, He also showed me the strength of grace. They exist in proportion. The deeper you understand your failure, the greater you experience His mercy. That's why Revelation feels both terrifying and beautiful, because you're seeing the truth about yourself and the truth about God at the same time. You see how far you've fallen, but you also see how far He's willing to reach to bring you back. Sin isolates, grace restores. Sin condemns, grace redeems. Sin hides, grace reveals. But you can't receive what you refuse to acknowledge. The first step of grace is honesty. When you stop pretending to be righteous and start admitting that you're broken, you make space for God to rebuild you. That's why humility is not weakness. It's the doorway to strength. Pride keeps you enslaved, but humility unlocks freedom. Jesus taught me that overcoming secret sin is not about willpower alone. It's about surrender. You don't conquer sin by gritting your teeth and trying harder. It's about direction. It means turning your eyes from what enslaves you toward what frees you, and that decision must be made again and again until it becomes your second nature. And yet, He showed me something even deeper, that walking in victory is not a lonely journey. You cannot heal in isolation from others. Secrecy thrives in solitude, but freedom grows in accountability. When you walk with others who pursue truth, you create a spiritual ecosystem where grace circulates. Accountability isn't about judgment. It's about strength. You surround yourself with people who remind you of who you are when you forget. Isolation is the enemy of transformation, because when you are alone with your temptations, your reasoning becomes distorted. You begin to justify, to negotiate, to soften conviction. But in community, truth echoes louder than temptation. He told me, walk with those who walk in light. Because light doesn't only expose, it multiplies. When one person stands in the light, others begin to see. When you share your story of struggle and redemption, you become a living testimony that inspires others to fight their own battles. You no longer hide behind perfection. You lead through authenticity, and that's how the redeemed live. Not pretending to be flawless, but radiating the strength of having overcome. The path of renewal and victory is not paved with ease. It demands vigilance, humility, and a continual returning to the presence of God. You don't graduate from dependence on grace. You grow deeper into it. Every day, you must choose to keep your heart transparent before God. That's why Jesus emphasized the practice of daily self-examination, not to create guilt, but to maintain clarity. The soul needs constant recalibration, just like a compass must be aligned to true north. If you neglect reflection, you drift, but when you take time to assess your motives, your actions, and your thoughts in the light of truth, you remain anchored. He showed me that the redeemed life is not free from temptation, but it is free from enslavement. The difference lies in awareness and response. You may still feel the pull of your old patterns, but now you have the power to choose differently. Temptation loses its authority when you recognize it early and respond with truth instead of curiosity. Renewal sharpens discernment. You begin to sense danger before it becomes disaster. That sensitivity is one of the greatest gifts of grace. It's God teaching you how to walk wisely in a world that constantly invites compromise. And this leads to another revelation. Your renewal is not only for you, it's for the people watching you. Those who will one day find hope in your transformation. The enemy of your soul doesn't just want your sin, he wants your influence. He knows that if he can keep you in secret bondage, he can silence your voice. But when you break free and walk in light, you become a guide for others still trapped in darkness. Every step of your renewal has generational impact. What you conquer in private will liberate others in public. Jesus made me see that the goal of transformation is not merely moral improvement, but the restoration of identity. You were never meant to live like a divided person, part light, part darkness. You were created to walk in wholeness, where your outer life reflects your inner truth. Renewal rebuilds that harmony. It brings unity between your will and your values, between your faith and your actions. And when that alignment returns, peace follows, not the temporary peace of avoidance, but the enduring peace that comes from authenticity. Living as the redeemed means walking humbly but confidently. It means remembering that you are not defined by your past, but refined by it. Every mistake becomes a monument of mercy. Every scar a story of grace. Redemption gives you a new kind of authority. Not the authority of perfection, but of authenticity. People don't follow those who appear flawless. They follow those who have fought darkness and emerged with light in their eyes. That is the beauty of living as the redeemed. You become both a warning and a witness, a reflection of how grace turns brokenness into power. And so the process continues. Not as a destination, but as a lifelong journey. Renewal becomes a rhythm. Redemption becomes a way of life. And every day becomes an opportunity to walk further into the light that first set you free. The path doesn't grow easier, but you grow stronger. And in that strength, you begin to see that what once enslaved you has now become the soil from which your purpose grows.